Hey guys, this is Kendall Terry, and this is looking at plant reproduction for AP Biology. Let's review, starting off with the life cycle of a flowering plant. That's the easy place to start. So when we look at the life cycle of a flowering plant, we can start with the seed here, which is a two-end plant. That means it's a diploid plant. That actually is going to grow into the sporophyte. Okay, so you produce the seeds. That grows into the sporophyte. You can see here, the sporophyte is what grows up. It is diploid. That sporophyte will produce flowers. Now, in that flower is where you'll find the gametophyte. The gametophyte would be here in the anther, those megaspores, and then here in the ovaries, the ovule, the microspores. So as those develop, they will produce through meiosis. They'll produce gametes, and in this case sperm, and in this case egg cells, and then the egg and the sperm come together through fertilization to produce that diploid zygote that will grow back into the sporophyte once again. So how do plants transition from juvenile to adult? Well, as soon as the plant germinates, most plants cannot produce a flower. Even if conditions are ideal, there has to be something that triggers that plant to produce a flower. So there's got to be a phase change, the transition of internal development that allows the plant to obtain competence to respond to external or internal signals, or both, that trigger flower formation. For example, you can look at this ivy right here. The juvenile form is on the right. You can see that here. The adult form is on the left. You can see that here. The juvenile has the ability to cling to walls. The adult version has changed shape to produce flowers and not cling to walls. So as it's growing, the first phase of it is to cling to walls and get up high. That's what's important. Then once it gets past that phase and as that transition, then it will get to the point where it can hang its flowers really off a little bit away from the building that it's holding on to, or the tree or whatever it's holding on to. It'll hang its flower out a little bit so that it can get noticed. If it produces that flower while it's still clinging to the wall, then that flower has a less chance of being fertilized. So there's a transition that takes place to get that plant to that fertilization period. How have mutations helped us understand phase change? Well, there's two genes that we like to look at with flower development. The embryonic flower, the EMF, and this is when normal EMF will be present, and I don't know why there's a space here, and decrease as the plant matures. In the mutant, EMF is not present and the plant flowers almost immediately. So here's a gene that we know a lot of, that we're learning more about. We've mutated the EMF gene. So when this EMF is present and everything's normal, the plant will not flower until it matures. If we mutate it and EMF is not present, then the plant will flower almost immediately. Another one here is what we call leafy. Leafy is the LFY gene, and it's a gene that's normally not turned on until mature. In a mutant aspen, for instance, it's been turned on and overexpressed, meaning it's there when it shouldn't be, and we're causing it to be overexpressed in abundance, and this causes the plant to flower weeks instead of years. Aspen will actually go years before they flower. But if you inject leafy or mutate the cells so that leafy is present when it's not supposed to be, it almost flowers instantly. And so there's obviously some gene connection here in relation to whether stuff is turned on or off. What are the four genetically regulated pathways of flowering plants? Well, the first is the light-dependent pathway. Short day plants, flowering is initiated when daylight becomes shorter than a critical length. So when you're looking at these will be plants that will be flowering in the fall, because they're looking for that daylight becomes shorter than a critical length. That's when they flower. Long day plants, or flowering plants, begin when daylight becomes longer. So this would be like your spring and summer flowering. And then day neutral plants flower when mature regardless of the day length. So when you're looking at this, you've got the obligate long day species flowers when night length is less than the maximum amount of required darkness, Your obligate short day species flower when the amount of darkness must exceed the critical night length for the species. And then you've got the facultative long or short day plants flower more rapidly or slowly depending on the length of the day. So you can really change a lot depending on the amount of night, the amount of darkness that they're getting exposed to, which in turn is also the amount of sunlight they're getting exposed to, so it goes back and forth. But it's all dependent upon the amount of light they're getting or the amount of darkness they're getting, and that will depend on then when they flower, and obviously that would be a seasonal thing as the days get longer and shorter as the years go on. What are the 4 genetically regulated pathways? We looked at light dependent, now we're looking at temperature dependent pathway. Some plants have a process called vernalization. In vernalization, plants require a period of chilling before flowering. So this would be this could be either spring or fall, but it has to go through a period of time where it gets a certain temperature, a cold temperature, before it will flower. And this gives you that ability to not flower too soon because you have to pass that threshold. So if you have to pass that threshold, then you're more likely to actually flower when there's going to be insects available to pollinate and stuff like that. The third one is gibberellin dependent. This decreases levels of gibberellin, delay flowering. Gibberellins enhance the expression of leafy, and we already talked about that leafy encourages flowering. So if you keep gibberellin levels low, then you delay flowering. If you increase gibberellin levels, then you increase leafy, and in increasing leafy, you increase flowering. And then you got the autonomous pathway. And the autonomous pathway, the first is looking at the ability of a plant to count. This is pretty cool. It knows how many nodes it has to have before it flowers. So if the shoot of these plants are removed at different positions, axillary buds will grow out and produce the same number of nodes, which are areas for leaves, before it will produce a flower. So here in this one, you have 5 nodes removed. It will grow 5 nodes before it flowers. And here you have 13 nodes removed, and look, 13 nodes will grow back before flowering. So it knows the ability. Somehow has the ability to count how much is missing. Pretty fascinating. Another autonomous pathway would be plant remembering. Plant remembering, the upper axillary buds of flower tobacco will remember their position when rooted or grafted. The terminal shoot tips become committed or determined to flower about 4 nodes before it actually initiates a flower. So if you take out, as you can see, the top nodes, no flower yet, but it's already committed at this point to flower. So when that's planted, it will produce a flower. Whereas here, you can take out the middle section of these nodes, they're replanted, and it will grow a particular number of nodes before it flowers. So sometimes it can remember, and it's already committed, so it will make sure that that flower is produced or not produced. You get the inhibitory signals are sent from the roots. In other words, the roots are going to inhibit the flowering until they get to a certain spot. Now you can see this. Here's the control plant. You see a short pot. The roots fill that pot up, and it produces flowers. Here is a pretty cool technique. They've continued to put pots and pots and pots and pots and pots. So you get this long stretch of pots, and sure enough, that root just continues to grow down, 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 until eventually it hits the bottom before it will allow this flower to take place. Whereas if you just remove the leaves, it's not a height. It's not that the flower has to be a particular height, because you can remove leaves and it will still flower. But if the root is able to continue to grow, then the root will inhibit the ability to flower until the roots have sufficed whatever checkpoint they're trying to meet.